Welcome to Today English Podcast. Here, we don't just learn English, we feel it. In every episode, you'll listen slowly, think deeply, and practice speaking with meaning and emotion. Today's topic is something that touches every heart. What makes life meaningful? So, take a deep breath, find a quiet place, and just listen slowly, calmly, completely. Because when you listen with your heart, English becomes more than a language. It becomes a way to understand life. It was still dark outside when my alarm rang. 5 a.m., the start of another productive day. I remember sitting up in bed, half awake, half proud of myself. I thought, yes, I'm doing it again. I'm one of those people who wake up early, plan their day, and get things done. I reached for my phone, opened my notes app, and stared at the long list of tasks I had written the night before. There were 27 things on it. 27. Meetings, calls, emails, reports, cleaning, groceries, a workout, replying to messages, finishing a side project, even watching a motivational video before bed. I smiled because I thought that list made me successful. I thought busyness meant I was doing well in life. And for a long time, that belief guided everything I did. But that morning felt different. Because even though I was doing everything right, something inside me felt heavy. The air in the room was still. My desk was covered with sticky notes and highlighters, like a battlefield of unfinished ideas. I looked at my laptop and whispered to myself, okay, let's get started. But my hands didn't move. Instead, I just sat there, staring at the glowing screen. The cursor blinked at me, as if it was waiting for me to remember why I was even doing this. Was it for success? For approval? For peace? I didn't know anymore. I opened my email inbox, 72 unread messages. I sighed and began replying, one after another. Fast. Efficient. Robotic. An hour passed. Then 2. The sun had risen, but I barely noticed. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't stretched. I hadn't even taken a breath to look outside. I was too busy being productive. Sometimes, we confuse movement with progress. We think if we're moving fast, we must be going somewhere. But I was starting to realize I was just running in circles. I remember looking at the clock around 9:30 a.m. and feeling like I had already lived an entire day. Yet, I hadn't felt a single moment. There was no joy, no peace, no purpose, just endless doing, endless motion, endless noise. At lunch, I met a friend, or at least I tried to. We sat across from each other at a small cafe. The smell of coffee filled the air. The sound of chatter surrounded us, but my mind was somewhere else. While my friend spoke, I nodded automatically, but I wasn't really listening. I was thinking about the next task, the next goal, the next thing I had to finish before 5 p.m. She paused and looked at me. Then she smiled softly and said, "Do you ever stop?" I laughed awkwardly. "Stop what?" She said, "Stop trying to do everything. Stop proving yourself all the time." Her words hit me quietly, like a whisper you don't expect to hear, but can't forget. I didn't answer. I just looked down at my coffee and realized I didn't even remember ordering it. That evening, when I came home, I checked off every box on my list. Everything was done. I should have felt proud. But I didn't. I sat there, feeling strangely empty, as if I had spent an entire day climbing a ladder, only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the same question. If I'm doing so much, why do I still feel like nothing is changing? I thought being busy meant being valuable. But maybe I was just hiding from silence. Maybe I was afraid to slow down. The next morning, I woke up again before sunrise. The same alarm, the same list, the same routine. But something inside me had shifted. I didn't jump out of bed this time. I didn't rush to open my phone. I just sat there, quietly. And for the first time in months, I asked myself, what am I really chasing? The room was silent, but that question echoed in my heart like thunder. I realized I had been running for so long, chasing goals, chasing approval, chasing the idea of success, that I had forgotten why I started running in the first place. I wasn't productive. I was just busy. Busy trying to fill a space that purpose once filled. And that's when I knew something had to change. That morning became the wake-up call I didn't expect. Not the one from my phone, but the one from my soul. A soft voice inside me whispered, maybe you don't need to do more. Maybe you just need to mean more. I didn't know exactly what that meant yet, but I was finally ready to find out. For years, I believed that being busy was a badge of honor. If someone asked me, how are you? My answer was always the same. I'm busy. And I said it with pride, as if being busy made me important. As if being constantly occupied meant I was living a meaningful life. But deep down, I was tired, not the kind of tired that goes away with sleep. It was the tiredness of always being on. Always doing. Always rushing. Always trying to catch up with a life that never stopped moving. I remember one Monday morning when I looked at my calendar and it was completely full. Back-to-back meetings. Calls. Deadlines. Errands. There was not a single blank space left, not even to breathe. I told myself, this is good. This means I'm productive. But later that night, as I scrolled through my phone, I realized I couldn't remember what I had actually done. Yes, I had completed tasks. Yes, I had answered messages. But what had I really achieved? I felt like I was running on a treadmill, moving so fast, sweating, exhausted, yet standing in the same place. That feeling grew stronger with time. Every day looked the same. Wake up early. Check emails. Rush through breakfast. Work. More work. Even more work. Then collapse into bed, thinking, I'll rest after tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. There was always something else to do. Another project. Another deadline. Another small emergency that made me believe my time wasn't mine anymore. Sometimes I'd open my laptop late at night and see my own reflection on the dark screen. Tired eyes. Heavy shoulders. A face that looked alive, but not living. And I'd whisper to myself, is this what productivity is supposed to feel like? I started noticing something strange. The more productive I tried to become, the less creative I felt. The more efficient my schedule was, the emptier my days felt. And the more I worked, the less I seemed to accomplish that truly mattered. It was as if I had built a beautiful machine, but I had forgotten what the machine was for. There's a kind of silence that only comes when your soul is exhausted, when you've given all your energy to things that don't feed your heart. I felt that silence often. It followed me like a shadow. I would finish a big project, and for a moment I'd feel proud, like I'd finally done something great. But then, a few hours later, the pride would fade. And I'd need another project to feel that spark again. Another task. Another rush of busyness. I had become addicted to doing. To being seen as someone who never stops. But in truth, I wasn't moving forward. I was just moving faster. One day, I went for a walk after work. The city was alive, cars, lights, noise everywhere. People were rushing past me with phones in their hands, faces tense, steps quick. It was like watching myself, multiplied 100 times. Everyone was busy. Everyone was moving. But no one looked present. I stopped by a small park, sat on a bench, and watched an old man feeding pigeons. He looked peaceful, almost glowing in his calmness. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt that way. He didn't seem rich. He didn't seem in a hurry. He just looked free. And for the first time, I wondered, maybe freedom isn't about having time. Maybe it's about having purpose. That thought stayed with me for days. I began to see how many of my tasks had no meaning. How often I worked just to feel useful, not because it truly mattered. I realized I was mistaking activity for achievement, mistaking noise for progress, mistaking motion for meaning. It's funny, isn't it? We live in a world that celebrates being busy. If you rest, people think you're lazy. If you slow down, people think you're falling behind. But what if rest is not laziness? What if silence is not failure? What if we've been chasing the wrong definition of success all along? I started to test something new. I removed half my tasks from my daily list. Just deleted them. It felt wrong at first, like breaking a rule. But I wanted to see what would happen if I focused only on what mattered. That day, I worked slower. I took breaks. I looked outside the window and actually noticed the sky. For the first time in months, I heard birds singing. It was such a simple thing. But it reminded me of something I had forgotten. Life isn't meant to be managed like a project. It's meant to be experienced. Still, the habit of busyness is hard to break. Every time I slowed down, a small voice inside me whispered, "You're wasting time. You're falling behind. You should be doing more." That voice wasn't my enemy, it was fear. Fear of being seen as lazy. Fear of losing my worth. Fear of discovering who I am without all the things I do. Because when your value depends on your productivity, you start working not from passion, but from pressure. And pressure, my friend, is a silent thief. It steals joy. It steals creativity. It steals peace. The illusion of productivity is powerful because it makes you feel accomplished, even when you're lost. It gives you the satisfaction of movement without the clarity of direction. It gives you a full schedule, but an empty life. That realization scared me, but also freed me. Because once you see the illusion, you can no longer pretend it's real. You start to question every habit, every goal, every so-called productive moment. And for me, those questions led to the next step in my journey, the moment I finally stopped running and decided to pause. There comes a point when your body starts whispering what your mind refuses to hear. Mine started with small signs. A headache that wouldn't go away. Eyes that burned every time I looked at the screen. A constant feeling of pressure, like something heavy sitting on my chest. But I ignored it. Because busy people don't stop. Busy people push through. Busy people don't rest, they maximize time. That's what I kept telling myself. Days blurred into nights. I drank more coffee. Slept less. I would wake up at 4:30 a.m. thinking about emails I hadn't sent. Sometimes I'd even dream of my to-do list, names, tasks, numbers floating in my mind like ghosts that wouldn't let me rest. There's a strange moment in burnout when you realize your own energy has turned against you. You're still moving, but without fuel. You're still talking, but without meaning. You're still working, but without life. I remember one Friday evening. I had been working for 12 hours straight. My back hurt, my eyes felt dry, and I hadn't eaten properly all day. I told myself, just one more email. But as I typed, my vision blurred. My fingers froze on the keyboard. And suddenly, I just couldn't do it anymore. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and felt tears fall down my face. Not because of pain. Not even because of exhaustion. But because I couldn't understand why I was doing this to myself. I had everything I once wanted, a busy schedule, clients, projects, people depending on me. On paper, I looked successful. But inside, I felt like an empty shell. When I spoke to friends, I said I was fine. When they asked about work, I smiled and said, busy as always. But deep down, I was breaking. There's something heartbreaking about losing your purpose. It's not loud. It's quiet, like a candle slowly burning out. You keep going because stopping feels scary. You keep pretending because slowing down feels like failure. One night, I was sitting on my couch, laptop on my knees, half reading an email, half scrolling through my phone. And suddenly, everything just felt too much. Too many notifications. Too many demands. Too many things screaming for my attention. I threw my phone aside and closed the laptop. The silence in the room was heavy. And for the first time, I felt afraid of the quiet. Because silence meant facing the truth that maybe I wasn't living. Maybe I was just surviving. The next morning, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were tired. My face looked older. But it wasn't just my face, it was my spirit that looked worn out. I realized something. Burnout isn't just about being tired. It's about being tired of yourself, of the person you've become while trying to be enough. I had become a stranger to my own life. I didn't laugh like before. I didn't feel inspired. Even the things I once loved felt like chores. It's strange how you can lose yourself in the process of proving your worth to the world. I decided to take a weekend off. No emails, no messages, no work. Just rest. But the first few hours were harder than I expected. I kept reaching for my phone. I felt guilty for relaxing. My mind whispered, "You're wasting time." But slowly, as the hours passed, the noise inside me began to quiet down. I sat by the window, watching sunlight fall on the floor. The air smelled like rain. For the first time in a long time, I took a deep breath and felt it, really felt it, travel through my chest. It was strange and peaceful. That day, I slept in the afternoon, something I hadn't done in years. When I woke up, I didn't rush to check my phone. I just sat there, watching the sky turn from blue to gold. And for the first time, I realized the world doesn't collapse when you stop working. Emails can wait. Deadlines can move. People can adjust. But your mind? Your soul? Your health? They can't wait forever. Burnout taught me something I wish I had learned earlier, that you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't create, connect, or grow when you're running on emptiness. And most importantly, you don't need to earn rest. You deserve it simply because you're human. That weekend changed everything. Because once I tasted real rest, I couldn't go back. I didn't want to live in constant exhaustion anymore. I didn't want to be busy, I wanted to be alive. And that's when the idea of a pause entered my life. A pause not as an escape, but as a mirror, a space to see what truly matters. The pause would become the turning point of my story. The moment I stopped running and started listening. The Monday after that quiet weekend felt different. I woke up and didn't rush. I didn't check my phone. I didn't even look at my to-do list. Instead, I just sat on the edge of my bed and listened. For the first time in years, there was no noise, only silence. No urgent messages. No alarms. No pressure to perform. The world was still moving, but I wasn't trying to catch it anymore. I went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of coffee, and watched the steam rise in the morning light. It was beautiful in the simplest way possible. I realized something that day. I had spent so much time rushing through life that I had forgotten to actually feel it. The warmth of a cup in my hands. The smell of rain on the ground. The taste of breakfast when you're not thinking about your next task. These little things, the things we call small, are what make life big. But pausing wasn't easy. At first, my mind rebelled. It kept screaming, "You're wasting time. You're falling behind." Every few minutes, I'd reach for my phone, then stop myself. It was like fighting an invisible addiction, the addiction to doing. I realized that I wasn't addicted to work itself. I was addicted to the feeling of being in control. To the illusion that if I was busy, I was safe. If I stopped, I might have to face my own thoughts. And that scared me. But the more I sat in silence, the more truth began to appear. It was like standing in front of a mirror that didn't show my face, but my soul. I saw how afraid I was of being unproductive. How much of my busyness came from fear, not passion. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being replaced. Fear of not being enough. That realization hit me like a wave. All this time, I thought I was chasing success. But maybe I was just running away from stillness. I went for a walk later that day, no headphones, no podcast, no phone. Just me and the sound of my footsteps. The air was soft, the wind gentle. For the first time, I noticed how beautiful the world was when I wasn't trying to conquer it. Leaves moved like they were dancing. Children laughed in the distance. Even the traffic seemed slower. It was as if the world hadn't changed, but I had. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a notebook and wrote one question: what really matters to me? At first, I couldn't answer. Because for so long, everything had mattered: my job, my image, my reputation, my schedule. But when everything matters, nothing truly does. So I started small. I wrote words that felt warm in my heart: peace, growth, connection, creativity, love. And when I looked at those words, I felt tears in my eyes, not from sadness, but from recognition. That was my purpose. Not my to-do list. Not my deadlines. Not my social media goals. But this: the feeling of being alive. For the next few days, I made a promise to myself to stop rushing and start listening. I listened to the sound of rain instead of checking notifications. I listened to my thoughts without trying to fix them. I listened to my own voice, the one I had ignored for years. It was quiet, gentle, and honest. It didn't ask for more. It just asked for meaning. You know what's interesting? When I slowed down, I actually started seeing my life more clearly. I realized that half of the things I called urgent didn't really matter. Half of the people I was trying to impress weren't even paying attention. And half of the stress I carried wasn't from reality, it was from my own imagination. I had built a prison out of busyness, and I was both the prisoner and the guard. But when you pause, the door to that prison quietly opens. You realize you can step outside anytime you choose. One morning, I watched the sunrise. The sky changed from dark blue to gold slowly, beautifully. It reminded me that nature doesn't rush, yet everything still gets done. The trees don't hurry to grow. The flowers don't panic to bloom. The sun doesn't compete to rise faster. Everything happens at its own pace. And maybe that's how we're meant to live, too. The pause wasn't just a break in my schedule. It was a shift in my soul. I started enjoying things again, reading slowly, walking without music, writing without a plan. I started feeling my emotions again, not just the easy ones, but also the heavy ones. Because when you pause, you don't escape life, you finally meet it. That week, I realized something powerful. The world doesn't reward you for being busy. It rewards you for being present. And the people who truly live, the ones who smile, who love, who create, are not the ones who rush the most. They're the ones who stop long enough to notice where they are. That's what the pause taught me. That life isn't a race. It's a rhythm. And if you listen closely, you can dance to it gently, freely, without fear. That pause became my turning point, the bridge between who I was and who I wanted to become. And it led me towards something even more important: rediscovering why I was doing everything in the first place. Because being still showed me something that busyness never could: that purpose doesn't appear when you move faster. It appears when you finally stop running. There's a moment, after the noise fades, when the silence starts to speak. At first, it's uncomfortable, almost frightening. But if you stay long enough, it begins to tell you things you've been too busy to hear. That's what happened to me. After I slowed down, after I paused, after I stopped running, I began to feel again. Not the rush of adrenaline from checking tasks off a list. Not the excitement of new goals or achievements. But something softer, deeper. Meaning. It began in small moments. One morning, I was sitting at a cafe, watching people walk by. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what I should be doing. I was just there, present. A woman nearby was laughing with her little boy. An old man sat by the window, slowly stirring his tea. A waiter smiled as he served breakfast to strangers. There was beauty in these simple things. No deadlines. No pressure. Just life, happening, unfolding, existing. And I thought, maybe this is what I've been missing. Meaning doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers in the quietest places, in laughter, in love, in ordinary mornings. It doesn't ask for your schedule. It asks for your attention. And once you start paying attention, life begins to look different. I went back home that afternoon and opened my notebook again. This time, instead of a long list of things to do, I wrote one sentence. What do I want to give my time to, not just spend it on? That question changed everything. Because time is not money. Time is life. And once you understand that, you stop spending it carelessly. I started to look at my work differently. I used to measure productivity by how many tasks I completed. Now, I began to measure it by how much meaning I created. If I worked on something that helped someone, inspired someone, or made me grow, it mattered. If it didn't, I began to let it go. It wasn't easy. Letting go never is. But I realized that when you hold on to everything, you lose your hands for what truly matters. One evening, I met an old friend for dinner, someone I hadn't seen in years. He used to be like me, always busy, always chasing something new. But that night, he seemed different. Calm. Grounded. We talked for hours. No rush, no phones, no pretending to be important. Just real conversation about dreams, fear, change, and purpose. At one point, I asked him, "How did you slow down? How did you stop chasing everything?" He smiled and said, "I stopped asking, what do I want to achieve, and started asking, what do I want to experience?" That line hit me so hard, I wrote it down as soon as I got home. Because achievement is about numbers, but experience is about life. Over the next few weeks, I began to rebuild my life, not around goals, but around meaning. I still worked, still created, still did things. But I did them differently. I no longer started my day with a to-do list. I started it with a question: what would make today meaningful? Sometimes the answer was simple: calling my parents, writing from the heart, helping a friend, taking a walk in silence. And strangely, the days that looked unproductive on paper became the most fulfilling in reality. Meaning doesn't make life easier, but it makes it worth it. When you find purpose in what you do, even challenges feel lighter. When you know why you're working, you no longer need the world to clap for you. You feel peace in your own heart. And that peace, that quiet satisfaction, is something no achievement can replace. One night, I sat by my window, the city lights glowing outside, and I realized something profound. For so long, I had been chasing a version of success that wasn't mine. I wanted to be seen, admired, respected. But what I really wanted was to feel alive. I didn't need applause. I needed alignment. I thought about all the things I once called waste of time. Reading slowly. Cooking. Sitting with family. Walking alone. They weren't a waste. They were the moments that connected me back to myself. I used to think life was about doing more. But now I understood, it's about being more. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm. The sun was already rising. I made tea and sat quietly, watching light fill the room. I didn't feel lazy. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt present. That's when I whispered to myself, maybe productivity isn't about speed. Maybe it's about sincerity. And in that moment, I finally understood what true productivity means: not the number of things you finish, but the number of things that truly matter when you're done. You know what's interesting? When I slowed down, I actually started seeing my life more clearly. I realized that half of the things I called urgent didn't really matter. Half of the people I was trying to impress weren't even paying attention. And half of the stress I carried wasn't from reality, it was from my own imagination. I had built a prison out of busyness, and I was both the prisoner and the guard. But when you pause, the door to that prison quietly opens. You realize you can step outside anytime you choose. One morning, I watched the sunrise. The sky changed from dark blue to gold slowly, beautifully. It reminded me that nature doesn't rush, yet everything still gets done. The trees don't hurry to grow. The flowers don't panic to bloom. The sun doesn't compete to rise faster. Everything happens at its own pace. And maybe that's how we're meant to live, too. The pause wasn't just a break in my schedule. It was a shift in my soul. I started enjoying things again, reading slowly, walking without music, writing without a plan. I started feeling my emotions again, not just the easy ones, but also the heavy ones. Because when you pause, you don't escape life, you finally meet it. That week, I realized something powerful. The world doesn't reward you for being busy. It rewards you for being present. And the people who truly live, the ones who smile, who love, who create, are not the ones who rush the most. They're the ones who stop long enough to notice where they are. That's what the pause taught me. That life isn't a race. It's a rhythm. And if you listen closely, you can dance to it gently, freely, without fear. That pause became my turning point, the bridge between who I was and who I wanted to become. And it led me towards something even more important, rediscovering why I was doing everything in the first place. Because being still showed me something that busyness never could, that purpose doesn't appear when you move faster. It appears when you finally stop running. There's a moment, after the noise fades, when the silence starts to speak. At first, it's uncomfortable, almost frightening. But if you stay long enough, it begins to tell you things you've been too busy to hear. That's what happened to me. After I slowed down, after I paused, after I stopped running, I began to feel again. Not the rush of adrenaline from checking tasks off a list. Not the excitement of new goals or achievements. But something softer, deeper. Meaning. It began in small moments. One morning, I was sitting at a cafe, watching people walk by. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what I should be doing. I was just there, present. A woman nearby was laughing with her little boy. An old man sat by the window, slowly stirring his tea. A waiter smiled as he served breakfast to strangers. There was beauty in these simple things. No deadlines. No pressure. Just life, happening, unfolding, existing. And I thought, maybe this is what I've been missing. Meaning doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers in the quietest places, in laughter, in love, in ordinary mornings. It doesn't ask for your schedule. It asks for your attention. And once you start paying attention, life begins to look different. I went back home that afternoon and opened my notebook again. This time, instead of a long list of things to do, I wrote one sentence. What do I want to give my time to, not just spend it on? That question changed everything. Because time is not money. Time is life. And once you understand that, you stop spending it carelessly. I started to look at my work differently. I used to measure productivity by how many tasks I completed. Now, I began to measure it by how much meaning I created. If I worked on something that helped someone, inspired someone, or made me grow, it mattered. If it didn't, I began to let it go. It wasn't easy. Letting go never is. But I realized that when you hold on to everything, you lose your hands for what truly matters. One evening, I met an old friend for dinner, someone I hadn't seen in years. He used to be like me, always busy, always chasing something new. But that night, he seemed different. Calm. Grounded. We talked for hours. No rush, no phones, no pretending to be important. Just real conversation about dreams, fear, change, and purpose. At one point, I asked him, "How did you slow down? How did you stop chasing everything?" He smiled and said, "I stopped asking, what do I want to achieve, and started asking, what do I want to experience?" That line hit me so hard, I wrote it down as soon as I got home. Because achievement is about numbers. But experience is about life. Over the next few weeks, I began to rebuild my life, not around goals, but around meaning. I still worked, still created, still did things. But I did them differently. I no longer started my day with a to-do list. I started it with a question: what would make today meaningful? Sometimes the answer was simple: calling my parents, writing from the heart, helping a friend, taking a walk in silence. And strangely, the days that looked unproductive on paper became the most fulfilling in reality. Meaning doesn't make life easier, but it makes it worth it. When you find purpose in what you do, even challenges feel lighter. When you know why you're working, you no longer need the world to clap for you. You feel peace in your own heart. And that peace, that quiet satisfaction, is something no achievement can replace. One night, I sat by my window, the city lights glowing outside, and I realized something profound. For so long, I had been chasing a version of success that wasn't mine. I wanted to be seen, admired, respected. But what I really wanted was to feel alive. I didn't need applause. I needed alignment. I thought about all the things I once called waste of time. Reading slowly, cooking, sitting with family, walking alone. They weren't a waste. They were the moments that connected me back to myself. I used to think life was about doing more. But now I understood, it's about being more. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm. The sun was already rising. I made tea and sat quietly, watching light fill the room. I didn't feel lazy. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt present. That's when I whispered to myself, maybe productivity isn't about speed. Maybe it's about sincerity. And in that moment, I finally understood what true productivity means: not the number of things you finish, but the number of things that truly matter when you're done. And each day, that choice to live with meaning, to slow down, to listen became my new way of being. Purpose. Such a small word, yet it carries the weight of our entire lives. We spend years chasing it, defining it, sometimes pretending we already know it, but deep inside, many of us are still searching. After months of slowing down, listening, and rediscovering meaning, I began to ask myself the question I had avoided for years: what is my purpose? It wasn't easy to answer. For a long time, I thought purpose was a goal, something to reach, something to check off. But now I understood, purpose isn't a finish line. It's a direction, a compass that guides you, even when you can't see the whole map. I started small. Every morning, I wrote one line in my notebook: what do I care about? At first, the answers were simple: my family, my health, my peace. Then they became deeper: truth, kindness, creativity, connection. And then, one day, the words that came out surprised me. I wrote, my purpose is to create something that helps others slow down and breathe. It was honest. It was small. But it felt real. That sentence changed how I saw everything. My work wasn't just about success anymore, it was about service. I began to measure my days not by how much I did, but by how deeply I lived. Some days were still messy. Some days I still got lost in old habits, working late, comparing, rushing. But now I could recognize it. And recognition is the first step to change. Purpose doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you'll never feel lost again. It means you'll always know how to find your way back. Whenever I felt anxious or overwhelmed, I would pause and whisper, why am I doing this? If the answer was fear, fear of failure, fear of missing out, fear of not being enough, I stopped. If the answer was love, love for the work, love for people, love for growth, I continued. That simple rule became my compass. One afternoon, I visited a local park I hadn't seen in years. There were children playing, families laughing, people sitting quietly with books. And as I walked under the trees, I thought, maybe purpose isn't something we find. Maybe it's something we grow into. We grow into it by living, by trying, by learning what feels right and what doesn't. We grow into it by listening, not just to the world, but to the quiet voice inside us. I remember one Sunday morning, it was raining softly, and I was sitting by the window with a cup of coffee. I took a deep breath and said aloud, I don't want to be busy anymore. I want to be alive. That was it. That was my truth. And once you find your truth, life begins to align around it. You start choosing differently. You say no to things that steal your peace. You say yes to things that feed your soul. You stop rushing to keep up with others and start walking at your own pace. And slowly, your life begins to look less like a race and more like a rhythm. I began to plan my days differently. Instead of filling my calendar with endless meetings and calls, I left space to think, to breathe, to create. That empty space became the most powerful part of my day. Because in that space, ideas were born. In that silence, clarity appeared. In that stillness, purpose spoke. One of the biggest lessons I learned was this: purpose isn't about what you achieve. It's about what you become while you're achieving it. You can win every prize and still feel empty. You can have less and still feel full if what you do is meaningful. And meaning always starts from within. I used to think I needed to find my purpose out in the world, in success, recognition, or adventure. But the truth is, purpose was never out there. It was always here inside me, waiting for me to slow down long enough to hear it. Once I understood that, I began to see purpose everywhere. In helping a friend. In writing something honest. In listening deeply to someone who needed to be heard. In taking care of myself, not as a reward, but as a responsibility. That's when I realized something powerful. You don't need to do something big to live with purpose. You just need to do something true. And so, I began to rebuild my definition of productivity. No longer as a list of tasks, but as a reflection of alignment. If what I did matched who I wanted to be, that was real productivity. If it didn't, no matter how busy I looked, it was just noise. That realization was both freeing and frightening. Freeing because it allowed me to let go. Frightening because it forced me to be honest. But honesty is where true growth begins. From that day on, I decided to make peace with my pace. To work deeply, but not desperately. To move slowly, but with intention. To create not from fear, but from love. And every time I felt the old rush, that temptation to do more just to feel valuable, I reminded myself, I'm already valuable. Even when I'm still. That's when I knew I was no longer chasing productivity. I was living with purpose. There's a moment, after every realization, when you have to choose, do I go back to who I was, or do I live what I've learned? I had spent years chasing success and months rediscovering meaning. Now it was time to live it, not in theory, but in practice. And living with purpose isn't a sudden change. It's a quiet shift in how you see, how you speak, and how you move through your day. The first thing I changed was how I started my mornings. Before, my alarm would ring, and I would jump straight into action, checking emails, planning tasks, rushing to be productive. Now, I began my mornings differently. I'd wake up, open the window, and just breathe. No phone. No noise. Just morning air, soft, cool, alive. Then I'd ask myself a simple question: what matters most today? Some days, the answer was work. Some days, it was people. And sometimes, it was myself. Whatever the answer was, I let it shape my day. It's strange how life changes when you slow down enough to listen to it. You start noticing the sound of birds in the distance, the way sunlight moves through the curtains, the taste of your morning tea. Things that once felt invisible now feel sacred. That's what living with purpose does. It makes ordinary moments extraordinary. At work, I stopped trying to do everything. I focused on doing the right things, the ones that matched my values and vision. Instead of filling every hour, I began leaving space for thought, reflection, and creativity. And something surprising happened. Even though I worked fewer hours, the quality of my work improved. I wasn't rushing. I was present. I wasn't chasing outcomes. I was crafting meaning. It was no longer about finishing tasks. It was about connecting with them. Purpose brings clarity, and clarity brings peace. When you know why you're doing something, you stop needing approval. You stop comparing. You stop feeling behind. One afternoon, a colleague asked, "Why do you seem so calm lately?" You used to be so intense. I smiled and said, because I finally realized that being busy doesn't make me better. Being present does. She didn't say anything, but later that week, she told me she had tried the same, waking up slowly, walking quietly, breathing before her day began. And she said, I felt human again. That made me smile. Because that's what purpose does. It doesn't just change you. It quietly inspires others too. Living with purpose also changed how I saw relationships. I used to think love was about giving time. But now I understood. It's about giving attention. When I spoke to someone, I looked into their eyes. When I listened fully, not while thinking of what to say next. And I noticed something. The more attention I gave, the more connection I received. Conversations became deeper. Moments became warmer. People began to open up because they could feel that I was really there. That's the power of presence. It's the simplest gift you can give, and the rarest one too. Even my evenings felt different. Before, I'd finish work and scroll endlessly through my phone, trying to relax, but never really resting. Now, I began ending my days intentionally. I'd dim the lights, make a cup of tea, and write in my journal. Not a to-do list, but a to-feel list. I'd write, what felt meaningful today? What did I learn? What am I grateful for? And almost every night, I found at least one small thing that made my day worth it, a kind word, a laugh, a moment of peace. That practice turned ordinary days into lessons. It helped me remember that purpose isn't just found in big dreams, it's built, one small act at a time. Living with purpose doesn't mean life becomes perfect. There were still busy days. There were still moments of stress, frustration, and doubt. But the difference was I didn't stay lost in them anymore. Now, when I felt overwhelmed, I paused and whispered, this is not forever. Then I'd return to my anchor, my why. And slowly, everything would come back into focus. Sometimes, I'd meet people who were still caught in the race, running, rushing, reaching, but never arriving. They'd ask, how do you stay so peaceful? And I'd tell them the truth, I'm not always peaceful. But I know where to return when I lose it. Purpose gives you that place, a quiet home inside yourself. A space where you can rest even when the world feels chaotic. Over time, I noticed another change, the way I spoke about success. Before, I used words like goals, targets, achievements. Now, I used words like impact, growth, joy. It wasn't about being the best. It was about being true. Because in the end, purpose isn't about climbing higher, it's about going deeper. One evening, I was walking home through the city. The streets were glowing with golden light, and people were hurrying past me, phones in hand, faces tense, eyes fixed on somewhere else. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to keep up. I slowed down, matched my pace to the rhythm of my breath, and thought, this is what freedom feels like. Not doing everything. Not being everywhere. Just being here, now enough. That night before bed, I whispered a promise to myself. I will no longer measure my life by how much I do, but by how much love I bring into what I do. And that promise changed everything. When you start living with purpose, the world begins to respond differently. Opportunities align. People appear. Peace grows quietly within you. You no longer rush to the future, you live the present fully. And that's when you realize you've been productive all along, not because you were busy, but because you were becoming who you were meant to be. For most of my life, I thought success was something I had to chase. It was always out there, waiting for me in the next project, the next achievement, the next recognition. I kept running, faster and faster, thinking that someday, when I reached it, I would finally feel complete. But success kept moving. Every time I got close, it shifted a little further, a little higher. And I realized something painful. I was chasing a moving finish line. Now, when I think about success, I smile. Because I see it differently. It's not a race anymore. It's a rhythm. Success is not about how far you go, it's about how true you stay. It's not about doing more, it's about doing what matters. It's not about being admired, it's about being aligned. I remember one morning when I sat by my desk, looking at my old planner. Pages full of deadlines, targets, and checkboxes. I used to think that a full schedule meant I was valuable. But now, it just looked empty. Because the truth is, I had filled my life with activity, not meaning. And activity without purpose is just noise. So I took a deep breath, closed the planner, and wrote on the first clean page, "My new success is peace." That was the most honest thing I had ever written. Peace, not the absence of work, but the presence of clarity. Not silence from the world, but silence within. When you live in peace with yourself, you no longer need to prove your worth. You don't need to impress anyone. You don't need to win every battle. Because you finally understand that the real victory is balance. People often say, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. But that's not always true. Even when you love what you do, there will be challenges, doubts, and tired days. The difference is when your work connects to your purpose, even the hard days feel worth it. That's the kind of success I was learning to build. One afternoon, I went for a long walk near the sea. The wind was strong, the waves were wild, but there was peace in that chaos. I watched how the waves kept coming, not rushing, not stopping, just flowing. And I thought, maybe success is like that. Not about fighting the waves, but learning to flow with them. Not about controlling life, but cooperating with it. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of freedom. Because for the first time, I didn't want more. I just wanted enough. Enough peace to breathe. Enough love to share. Enough purpose to keep going. That's it. That was my definition of success. And strangely, when I stopped chasing, things started coming. New ideas, better relationships, opportunities that matched my values. It was as if life had been waiting for me to slow down, so it could finally catch up. Because when you stop running, you give good things a chance to find you. One evening, I was sitting on my balcony, the city lights blinking in the distance. And I thought about all the years I had spent trying to be someone. Someone successful. Someone respected. Someone seen. But now, I didn't want to be someone. I just wanted to be myself. And for the first time, that felt like enough. That's the quiet truth most people never tell you. You don't find happiness when you get everything you want. You find it when you finally stop needing everything you don't. And that's when I realized success is not something you achieve. It's something you feel when your life matches your heart. Today, when people ask me, how do you stay motivated? I tell them I stopped chasing motivation. I started living with meaning. Because meaning doesn't fade. It grows. It nourishes you from the inside. And that's when productivity becomes peace, not busyness, not pressure, not noise, just quiet, intentional progress that feels true. I still work hard. I still dream big. But now I dream with balance. I make time to rest, to laugh, to love. Because I've learned that rest is not laziness, it's wisdom. A rested mind creates better. A peaceful heart connects deeper. A slow life sees clearer. If you're listening to this now, maybe you've been running too. Maybe you've been busy, but not fulfilled. Maybe you've been productive, but not peaceful. If so, take this as your reminder. You don't need to do more. You just need to do what matters and do it with your whole heart. Because productivity without purpose is just busyness. But productivity with purpose, that's meaning. That's growth. That's freedom. So slow down. Breathe. Ask yourself softly, what truly matters to me right now? And whatever your answer is, let that guide you. Because success isn't waiting in the future. It's here. It's now. It's in the way you live this very moment, with awareness, with love, and with purpose. When I look back now, I smile. Because I can finally see how far I've come, not in distance, but in depth. There was a time when I measured my life by how much I did. Every hour had to be filled, every minute had to count. If I wasn't doing something, I felt guilty, as if resting was a mistake. But today, I understand something simple yet powerful. Life isn't about filling every moment. It's about feeling every moment. I used to chase productivity, thinking it would bring me peace. But I was wrong. Peace doesn't come from doing everything. It comes from doing the right things with heart, with focus, with purpose. And once you find that balance, everything changes. You stop fighting time. You start flowing with it. Sometimes I wonder how many of us are still living like I once did. Running without resting. Working without wondering why. Achieving without feeling alive. We wear our busyness like a badge of honor. We call exhaustion discipline. We call distraction dedication. But deep down, we know something isn't right. Because no matter how much we do, it never feels enough. No matter how far we go, we still feel behind. That's not living. That's surviving. If you've been feeling that way lately, if you're tired, restless, or stuck in endless motion, take this moment to pause. Just breathe. Close your eyes. Listen to your heartbeat. Feel that quiet rhythm inside you. That's life, not your to-do list, not your deadlines, not your achievements. Just you. And you're enough. Purpose isn't something you need to find far away. It's already within you. It's in the things that make your heart light up, in the people who make you feel alive, in the moments that make you forget about time. It's in how you show up, not how fast you move. When you live with purpose, productivity becomes natural. You don't need to force it. You don't need to chase it. You just live fully, sincerely, intentionally, and productivity follows like a shadow. Because real productivity isn't about control. It's about connection. So from today, try this. When you wake up, don't ask, what do I need to do? Ask, what do I want to feel today? If you want to feel peaceful, do things that bring peace. If you want to feel creative, make space to imagine. If you want to feel loved, give love first. And slowly, you'll notice something beautiful happening. Your days will start to feel lighter. Your work will start to feel alive. Your heart will start to feel free. Remember, you don't have to do everything. You just have to do the things that mean something. Because when your actions and your purpose walk in the same direction, every step becomes success. I'll leave you with one final thought. There's a big difference between living fast and living fully. Fast life moves quickly, but it often misses the details. Full life moves gently, but it sees everything. Choose fullness. Choose meaning. Choose purpose. Because productivity without purpose is just busyness. But purpose, even without constant productivity, is peace. So wherever you are right now, pause for a moment. Breathe deeply. And say softly to yourself, I am enough. I am doing enough. And I will live with purpose. Because that's where real life begins, in the quiet space between doing and being.